Good morning, America. Thank you for joining us here at Taxes Made Easy. We're going to be talking some more about taxes and taxation today and how it can affect your personal situation. So, looking at what countries are doing with their taxes and interest rates can absolutely figure into your own personal situation. And we're going to be talking some of that again, focusing on paying down debt and being responsible with your finances, but also how different things in the economy are affecting inflation and affecting your bottom line, your dollars at home. So we're going to be covering quite a few different topics today. It's a little bit more of a lazy day that it's a federal holiday today. I know a lot of people are still working, but the federal government is shut down today for Juneteenth. But again, a lot of good economic stories out there and how it can affect us as a country, but also you personally and your personal finances. Welcome back, and we're going to start off today with a quick little article here. It's it's not really funny. It's more just kind of sad. Um, Stonehenge was targeted by climate activists. It's a good way to get information, a good way to get on the news, but it's a good way for everybody to hate you. Targeting, Stonehenge that's thousands of years old, um, with orange paint to deface it. I don't even see where that makes sense. The Just Stop Oil movement does have members in English Parliament. They do have influence within the federal government, but from their perspective, I had two people, one a student, one was an elderly gentleman. Um, they're both arrested. And these stones go back to the late Neolithic period. However, climate activists like this are convinced they're millions upon millions of people are gonna die if we don't stop using oil and stop it now. The problem is oil is ubiquitous. It's in everything we use, in our clothes, in our so many products. So just completely stopping oil would cause huge economic damage to the country. It would be very jarring to most people. Either aren't ready for that, or they don't think that everybody's going to die if we don't follow the climate alarmism that's out there today. So, on one hand, you have climate activists that believe that look, we have to do this now, and if we don't, millions will die. So they believe that they're protecting our future. However, destroying our past, I don't think is the right way to do this. So there was when they started doing this, a lady started trying to drag them off, and then more people came in and dragged them off until the police came and arrested them. So more bad acting here, and this is another issue with a new Boeing whistleblower coming out, and he went to Senator Blumenthal, who's a Democrat, and it's both parties. It's not this whole Boeing fiasco. Both parties are calling them out here, and went to Richard Blumenthal. He's the Democratic senator from Connecticut, and he's alleging now that Boeing uses parts that should be discarded or fixed on newly built airplanes. So defective parts, let's just put it in a new plane. Why not? We're going to save money and not get rid of these. So again, it's the profit margin being the ultimate point here. But again, you have Boeing is being sued for by whistleblowers, and then they had two whistleblowers die. But it's becoming it has been an issue, and it's only gotten worse. So I mentioned yesterday that the CEO, David Calhoun, was forced to testify in the Senate and they had pictures of people that had died on Boeing crashes. So again, it lists some of the issues again. But I think this is really damning that this just comes out. And I don't know what's happened with the culture at Boeing, but I am glad to see that it's both parties that are holding them accountable and questioning this and saying this isn't right. So, this is happening in the Democrat-controlled Senate. The House has been on them for a while, the Republican-controlled House. And I'm glad to see there is more that happens on a bipartisan basis than we know about. It's kind of scary, though, that Boeing is having so many issues. So on a lighter note, U.S. pet industry is booming. Everybody likes pets. Well, most people like pets. And the article kind of goes into more money being spent than ever on pets. In 2024, government estimates 150.6 billion will be spent on pets, a 3 billion increase from the previous year. That's about a 1.5% increase. They're saying that's more than the most GDP of most countries in the world. So if it taken just on its own, it would be the 59th largest economy, just behind Ukraine. So a lot of this is just lavish spending. They talk about one extreme example. It's Bark Air. And you'd think this would be The Onion or something like that, or satire. But tickets go for $6,000 from New York to LA. And these planes are specifically designed for pets. And they cater to pets and make sure that they have a excellent experience. Well, this is just a small drop in the overall budget or amount being spent on pets. Overall, the number of pet owners have increased, especially since COVID. It kind of breaks it down. Millennials and Gen Z are actually leading the way. And one of the things that it's connected to is as we have more pets, part of that is to have companionship because overall we're having a lot less children. So the number of childless homes jumped to 27%, while U.S. households in 1940 was 8%. So the number of single adults out there without anybody in their home has increased dramatically over that's over 80 years, but it's a continuing trend. So everybody loves their pets. Pets are great. Just be mindful. And one interesting thing is the IRS does not allow for pet expenses. So I have people that call frequently, well, what about all my pet food? What about going to the vet for my pet? What about all this stuff? All pets are important. So far, the IRS code does not give you any credit for having pets, taking care of your pet, pet doctor bills, nothing like that. Pet health insurance. So that's seen as an optimal, a choice, rather than a need. So as of right now, unless it's for health reasons or owned, like PTSD or something like that, or for a blind dog or something like that, they're just not going to allow it. So jumping to the next tab, this gets a little more, I'm going to switch this up. Going to talk about electric vehicles. Again, this has been in the news. Another electric vehicle. This makes 3 of them that have filed for bankruptcy and have stopped making electric vehicles. And the frustrating part with this is we want competition. We want healthy competition. But when the market, again, here it is, boom, everybody started building electric vehicles. We had massive government subsidies. And they probably overproduced. They didn't correctly gauge how many people were actually interested in electric vehicles. So it was a quick boom, and now it's crashing. And Ford, Toyota, GMC, they've all announced cutting back on their EV programs and retooling entire factories to produce EVs. because they're just not selling. And so here's another, again, the newer, less established companies struggle to survive through some of these issues. And so, again, it's another one that's going bankrupt and closing down, which it's sad to see. We have all the subsidies poured into these companies, produce EVs didn't last. And I think that's going to be one of the things that we focus on today is just because you have government subsidies doesn't mean things are going to last. So we're going to jump to the next article, and this is really focused on education. And I think the theme this week has just been mainly just because we throw money at something doesn't mean, and we're talking about the government, doesn't mean it's going to be successful. Just because we throw money at a problem in our own personal lives doesn't mean it's going to help our finances. We have to sit down, get expert advice, and make decisions that are truly going to help us thrive moving forward. So this is really going into the 40 years later, our spending has gone up dramatically since the 80s. So we're spending roughly double. The amount of school spending has definitely outpaced inflation. So this is citing Eric Honishek, who's a world top education scholar, and they're really focusing on school spending. So it's quadrupled since 1960, and that's adjusted for inflation. And since 1980, we were spending twice as much now that we were in the 80s. So even accounting for spending, you would think that we'd get a lot more bang for our buck. And too often politicians are very short-sighted. And a part of that is due to a lot of public PR campaigns, where it's the teacher unions. I'm going to kind of throw them under the bus. They're some of the worst culprits about always constantly campaigning for more money, and almost no accountability. So going back to the top of the article, especially post-COVID, math scores hit a 20-year low. ACT scores dropped to a 30-year low last year. There's dozens of schools or school districts where not one child is reading at a practicing math or math at grade level proficiency. We see similar results for reading or whole entire districts where, again, it's just absolutely atrocious the kind of education that these kids are getting in these public schools. Now, to be fair, and I'm running out of time, it's not just the school's fault. But when we have failing schools in horrible areas, we are out of time. So I'm going to continue this when we come back, and in just a minute. Welcome back, everybody. And continuing on with this article, um, and a lot of this is just really inner city schools, ghetto areas that just have not been taken care of. They've been ignored by both parties. Years ago, 30 years ago, actually, when I was in the Navy, I had the privilege of going to an inner city school, and it was someone I knew from church, and he had served in the military, but now he felt his calling was to be an inner city school teacher. And I went with him to school one day. And this crazy part is, as we were driving to the school, this is a very rundown area of the neighboring city, and this is in Virginia. And there's some areas that are just absolutely run down, and people are living there. It's not a shame that people are living there, but the crime was just rampant. You had drug dealers on the corners as you got close to the school. Some of them selling directly to the kids. I mean, it was nuts. There was absolutely no shame or hiding it whatsoever. And I was there and I assisted him for the day in class, and we were talking about on the way home. And he would get very emotional about it. He was very connected to his kids and his class, that he taught. I think it was fourth grade or something like that. He was saying almost half of his kids had already witnessed a murder. Most of them saw drug deals happen, and that's how, in their homes, or family members going and getting drug deals. And most of these kids were dealing with PTSD from, especially the ones that witnessed murders and stuff. He's like, how do you teach these kids? More programs, more money being thrown at this situation to failing schools is not a solution. It just exacerbates and continues the problem. So I think this is, like Vietnam sat down and said, okay, what is really going on here? How do we really improve the situation? And it's not more taxation. It's not, just throwing more money at the issue. That more money might be a solution. But one thing that this article talks about, taxpayer money poured in as if from a fire hose. And talks about it quadrupling. But there isn't much evidence of improvement in most school districts, the reverse of true, that all the time, all this money, things have gone down in many school districts. Why is that? Again, you have the feds have kicked in hundreds of billions of dollars. No evidence that Uncle Sam's spending has had much value. It's added more tape. So just like we talked about a lot of the aid to African countries, very little of the aid actually gets to the purpose of it. Most of it adds to more bureaucracy and red tape. So, the administration of these school districts has just gone out of control. The red tape, trying to get anything done, and test scores haven't budged. If anything, they've gotten worse. So again, we're going to spend hundreds of billions of dollars more, because who's one of the biggest power plays in this? Teachers unions. And so, again, across many red states, you had 13 states that are adding programs to allow education dollars to follow the kids, meaning that all parents, lower income parents, others, can send their kids to charter schools, Catholic schools, or other alternatives, even homeschooling. But it's a parent that decides what's best for their kids. And the more involved the parents are, the better the better this. Usually the involved parents are the ones who kids thrive in school. Now, personally, I'm not the best parent when it comes to schooling. I usually show up if there's a problem, but most of the time my kids have straight A's, or maybe a B here and there. They're doing well. They're in advanced classes, but I started them off reading. I got them involved, and as long as they're doing well, I make sure and kind of keep my what's going on. But we encourage reading. We encourage education here in our home, and that's made readily available to them. It starts in the home. It starts with families, and the disintegration of the family is a huge problem affecting kids. But we need to think outside the box. One of the key conclusions here that some evidence that spending money can improve in student learning, but that's only when dollars are tied to rewarding performance. So incentivizing teacher excellence through pay for performance and getting rid of bad teachers by eliminating or reforming tenure can improve schools dramatically. My own kids had my oldest, when he was in high school, had a teacher that was tenured. She didn't care. She spent half of it, she was a music and band teacher. Half of every class she would spend in her office. I took band, and I went to a small school, but we always had band teachers that cared. And we were working on music almost every single day. I mean, that's what we did. The teacher was always in the classroom. They weren't off on their own, doing their own thing with the office door closed. And what are band students if they're not playing their instruments? What are they doing? So again, I'm sure there's other things that can be done, but to have teachers completely checking out like that, it's just been insane. So there are reforms coming across the country, but I would say look at what's going on for your own kids. And the biggest criticism is of these laws are like, look, parents that care will pull their kids out and go somewhere else. What about the public schools? I don't care about public schools, and neither should we. It should be about the kids. One of the charter schools that I've had the privilege of volunteering at through Junior Achievement, which is focuses on financial literacy for K through 12. It is a charter school, and a third of their student body is homeless. And when you go in and you work with kids that are homeless, families living out of the cars, or they're in and out of shelters, this school really focuses on that population and focuses on giving them a good education despite the huge challenges. Now, educating kids that are homeless is tough. They're not going to have a Chromebook that they can go home and get on the internet or plug in somewhere. I mean, they make them available there on school, but a lot of these kids, if you're moving around, that stuff gets stolen too. If you don't have home security, it really is a very sad situation. So, I highly recommend if you have kids. Look, I mean, my kids go to public school. We're in a school district that's excellent. But most kids today, especially in public schools, if the parents are involved, if you have struggling families, they can be horrible. And I think making that available where kids can get the education they need, that should be the number one priority of our educational system. So continuing on, next article here. This is something that's been in the news, and I kind of ignored it. I haven't talked about it too much. But again, that President Biden just announced, well, I guess this just happened yesterday, but it's been in the works for a little while, mass amnesty for illegal immigrants. So again, at least 500,000 illegal immigrants, if they have been in the U.S. 10 years, I don't know how they track that if they came here illegally, and are married to a U.S. citizen, and then another 50,000 non-settled children whose parent is married to a U.S. citizen. So children under 21 years old, and those aren't children if they're 18 through 21. Regardless, this is the biggest step towards amnesty since the DACA program under President Obama in 2012. I'm sure this is going to get sued like crazy. It's going to go to court. This is again being done by executive action, so flies in the face of existing immigration laws, and it pretty much is taking an end round again around immigration laws. Do I sympathize with people that come and work and are good citizens and contributing to the economy? Absolutely. Does it cause massive distortions in our housing and the economy? And is that part of what's really driving inflation? Absolutely. So there's a cost towards mass immigration. So I just want to focus that it's not just about Republican versus Democrat. You even have Democrat governors that are now standing up and saying we need to secure the border. Why? Because crime is going up, and there are a lot of issues that goes with it. So just because, and personally, I think this isn't going to be just 500,000. There's something people estimate there'll be millions upon millions that are going to take advantage of this. I do think we need to make people part of the system, get them legal, get them following the rules of law. But the problem is, unless you correct the border, all you're doing is encouraging millions more to come across and flood the border. So, again, this is a huge magnet if they think they can come and eventually just become legal by making an end run around immigration laws. And I'm the first to say our immigration laws are crazy. They're people trying to do it legally, it is tough. So we should improve it in many ways. But again, this is an interesting article from Breitbart, and citing a UN nuclear watchdog. And this is Rafael Grossi, and he's the director of the IAEA, which is supposed to enforce the nuclear deal that President Obama made with Iran. And you have, so he works for the UN, and the nuclear deal with Iran, it was a failure from the start, mainly because it was put on paper doesn't mean it's going to have the desired result. So Iran started cheating from the start. So you had Israeli intelligence obtained documents in 2018 showed that the Iranian government was violating the non-proliferation commitments under the agreement. It's continued when President Trump came to office. He said this is ridiculous because we were giving them billions and billions of dollars and they were still cheating and not following the rules. Lo and behold, the Iranians were cheating and just taking our money and thinking we were idiots. The European powers that also signed it they've tried to continue to follow up on this and make sure that there was some kind of compliance with this agreement. But Iran, even before, they have been fighting inspections, and they've actually increased and accelerated the production of fissile material, so enriching uranium to produce nuclear weapons. And so, again, here's some statements directly from Grossi. I continue to tell my Iranian colleagues that we must provide the agencies with at least minimal access to help return the second version of the treaty. But this treaty was not ratified by Congress, so does not have the effect of, it's not been accepted by Congress, so it is kind of meaningless because Obama never took it to Congress, knowing that it would not pass in Congress. And they're still trying to cooperate with Iran. However, Iran, all they do is complain. That Iran is the most inspected country in the world. And he's like, well, that's for good reason. And he's like, what they're doing is not enough because it is continuing. So there's still people trying to hold the deal, trying to hold Iran accountable. And Iran is not listening at all. So jumping to Kenya, and I want to spend some time on Kenya. Most people are like, where is Kenya? It's in Africa. It's right in the middle of Africa. And when we talk about economic freedom, and it's really sad that a lot of African countries really struggle. Africa, just like South America, is a very resource-rich area. Each different country is different in the resources they have, but they experience very, very high rates of poverty throughout Africa. And the question is why? So to kind of give an overview, the president of Kenya, I'm not sure if no, I'm not sharing this. Let me go and share this article so you can see it. The president of Kenya is raising taxes across the board. And, some on bread, and you have protesters in the street actively fighting against these increases in taxes, and they're substantial. So a 16% tax on bread. There's oil. There's cooking oil. There's taxes that are going up across the board on all kinds of items. The main issue is they owe 80 billion in debt. So we owe around 35 trillion now. But here, this 80 billion in debt for a much smaller, impoverished country is absolutely killing it. And the current president Ruto, his main complaint is, look, the previous administration overspent like crazy, and we're trying to rein things in and deal with this debt. But the problem is, whenever you try to implement fiscal responsibility, it's really tough on the population. So that's why eventually we'll have to deal with our tax debt and national debt here in the United States. The question is, how much pain are we going to suffer as a country because of it? So his tax proposals are not going over very well, as you would expect. You have he's in the majority party. They're the ruling party here, but it is hurting people. Cooking oil, taxes on cooking oil, mobile money services, motor vehicles. Also have hit the insurance industry, and so one of the taxes that was proposed that's been reversed was an eco tax that targeted projects such as plastics, packaging, tires. And this is a British spelling coming from the BBC. And again, people are complaining, saying, hey, we need nappies, sanitary towels, computers, mobile phones. If you tax oil products, it's going to hurt a lot of the economy. And we just saw this thing with Stonehenge being attacked. The same topic, and he's trying to help, but again, raising taxes is just not the only solution and often not the best solution. So increasing the housing levy of 1.5%. But he's trying to pay down this government debt. He's trying to free up resources for the future so they're not just paying through the interest through the nose. And that's one of the big problems with a lot of foreign aid is that they provide loans to companies or to countries. They get hooked on these loans. And one political party takes a lot of UN or global loans. And then the country has to dig their way out and pay all these loans back. So this is seen as another form of colonialism, and it's crashed entire economies. It crashed the economy of the Ottoman Empire. So this is nothing new, where people loan plenty of money, and then the interest over time really kills the borrowing countries and causes a lot of damage. So we're going to take another break and be back shortly. Welcome back, everybody. And just want to kind of wrap this up. Again, the taxes being increased. And connected to this is another BBC article. The president wants people to love the taxman. For some reason, I don't think that's going to work. That's not the best political campaign motto. We love the taxman. And he's arguing here, and he might have somewhat of a point, but he said they've been socialized to believe that they pay the highest taxes. And even when they don't, though, people usually don't appreciate making their life harder. And these are people struggling in poverty, just trying to get by. This is not an affluent society. And he's trying to increase his overall taxes to around 20% of GDP. And it talks about the different taxes that we just talked about. And he's saying that if people want better public services and a reduction in the country's debt burden, then they have to pay up. It shouldn't be a one-size-fits-all. If we want more money, we have to tax more. And one of the things it talks about here is, it compares the percentage to other African countries. And, while President Ruto is correct that it's low compared to some African countries, it's just below the average when you look at it. Overall, there's about a 15.6% tax rate throughout Africa. Kenya's is around 14%. So here in the United States, we see the same thing. We're undertaxed. The rich don't pay their fair share, blah, blah, blah. I mean, it's something that we hear all the time. But there are other ways to address this to boost government revenue and reduce borrowing. So, sometimes, increasing taxes is the right way. But if you're going to do that, it should be a mix. And one of the things it talks about is a Laffer curve, which, coming from the BBC, it's an economic theory that the more you try to increase taxes, the less you can actually get. Again, it reduces people's incentive to work and pay up. They said high taxes naturally leads to low collection and more cheating of the system. So those that cheat the system and play outside the system get away with more, whereas law-abiding citizens get hit the hardest. And often when you increase taxes, the people that have money for fancy lawyers, etc., they'll fight it. They'll find other ways to get around taxes. But it's the middle class, the lower income and middle class that gets hurt the most, because they're the ones that are trying to play by the rules, trying to do everything right and avoid these issues. So, first of all, the author of the article says he should ensure taxes are properly collected before raising rates. Eliminate corruption, which is a big problem throughout much of Africa. Government corruption and waste. Here in the United States, we have lots of waste in government corruption. And then you have the argument that higher taxes can be self-defeating as they hurt businesses, they hurt the economy, lead to closures, job losses, and less GDP all around. So increasing the taxes too quickly can actually decrease the economic output of our country and hurt people all around. I thought it was a very interesting case study here, one that I haven't talked about before. And how does that mean to us? So again, they have this 80 billion debt in Kenya, and they're trying to get caught up, because especially now with high inflation, the last thing you want to do is owe debt. So there's this interesting article from Breitbart, and they call it bud inflation, but I think this is just people spending on wants and going into debt for what they want to do rather than what they need to do. And one of these, the other day I talked about an article where the Biden administration is trying to pass new law increasing, throwing more money at home ownership, but also making it more attractive to take out HELOCs and access the equity in your home. While that might help short-term spending, it definitely hurts people for long-term equity and wealth, growth of wealth to be borrowing against the equity of your home. Again, the interest rates are high. Now it's one of the worst times to do it. And so this article takes a look at parents taking children or people just going to Disneyland and borrowing money due to the high cost of these vacations. I mean, you go into Disneyland, everybody knows the food is outrageous, the meals are outrageous, and that's what people are paying a lot of money on, and more people are taking out debt to take vacations. So 40%, 45% of parents with children under the age of 18 taking out some kind of debt, average of $2,000 to go to Disneyland. So it's one of those things. A lot of people grew up going to Disneyland. I did as a kid, but I haven't taken my kids there. I focus more on camping, seeing history, and yes, it's fun to go to amusement parks and it's a great grand time. I think I have just as much fun with my kids out fishing on a lake, and I think it's better quality time. So personally, I haven't done that, but it is very, very popular to go. If you want to go to Disneyland, go to Disneyland. Don't take out debt to do that. Again, it's a huge cost that gets added on, and when we're talking about, we can't just raise taxes in our home. We have to manage our spending to deal with increased taxes, increased inflation, and borrowing money is the last thing you want to do when there's high inflation. If anything, you want to be investing money because that's where people make money. It's not by borrowing money; it's by investing money. So again, can't emphasize this enough to pay down, get rid of credit card debt, get rid of personal loans, other kinds of debt, and try to live debt free. That's especially as interest rate. Everybody wants inflation and interest rates to go down. Long term, I think we have a lot of damage coming. That really takes us to our last article for today, and this is again from the Epic Times. The price of everything, the value of nothing. Interesting article, by Jeffrey Tucker here. But it's talking about what has inflation done to our economy in the last 3 years. And one of the things he points out is that it's not the first time this has happened, but it is usually very tough economic times. So it's basically saying the dollar's lost about a quarter of its domestic purchasing power in the last 3 years. It's a very short time to have that much inflation. So they take about it year by year, but if you take the last 3 years to have a 25% inflation rate over 3 years, that's really tough. And again, there's plenty of people to blame. The blame can be put on Republicans for keeping the interest rates low, artificially low for so long. It can be blamed on Democrats and Republicans spending through COVID, even after COVID. There's a lot of hubbub in Congress, and they actually try to get rid of Mike Johnson, like McCarthy before him, for signing on to spending bills without making cuts. Now, Congress, and this is both parties, they don't have the stomach for fiscal sanity yet. They're both spending like drunken sailors. So I expect that to continue until things get really bad. And it will happen. So you also had 25% inflation from 82 to 92. But during that time period, we had high growth. So 1992 to 2000, it's also a period of high growth with the dot-coms, etc. So you had high growth overall. And then from 2001 to 2012, another period of high growth. So to have something like that happen, the dollar be eroded, but You have high growth, productivities increasing. It's not the end of the world. As long as incomes are going up, people are becoming more prosperous. That's typical. We'll have some inflation every single year. That adds up over time. Again, if we were better with our finances as a country, we wouldn't have that. But they're saying this is the last time we had such an extreme loss was in the late 70s. The dollar lost a quarter of its value from 75 to 79. So over 4 years, and that's due to stagflation. And again, and I've been hammering this. Current numbers are likely greatly underestimated. I add greatly in there because we know they're underestimated. I look at actual costs that people are dealing with every single day. And they exclude housing utilities. Rent has gone up through the roof. Health insurance has gone up through the roof. This is a interesting point here. Do you believe that health insurance costs have gone down or less today than in 2018? Absolutely not. They've gone through the roof. And the problem is most people aren't seeing it because those costs are hidden due to the ACA or through the exchanges due to Obamacare. The true cost that most people of health insurance is hidden by subsidies, massive government subsidies. So when someone goes through the exchanges, if they qualify for the exchanges, so the vast majority of people get a decent deal going through the exchanges, but they have to deal with the exchanges. They have to play with that. If their income goes up, they get a deal with paying those subsidies back. But the actual cost to our economy is much higher. And if you have to go get private insurance, it's insane. It's really nuts. And then they complain about shrinkflation, quality changes, hidden fees for companies to try to keep up. So as purchasing power decreases, that also decreases living standards. Means working harder, scrambling more, adding more income to the household revenue stream just to keep up. And also high inflation punishes savings. It eats into savings by punishing rather than rewarding thrift, thrifty living. If you're trying to put money away, and we should have an emergency fund. We should have 3 to 6 months of income socked away in a rainy day and then be investing. But very, very few people are doing that because it's very hard to obtain when things are stretched. So one of the things they talk about here, and they mention, and I'm not even, so this article goes on for a while, but we're running out of time. In the 80s, one of the ways that people dealt with huge inflation costs is they started working. Both parties, husband and wife, were working. And so that brought in more income to the home. But there's, other issues that go with it. Today, people are doing side jobs. They're doing little gigs. They're taking on extra work. Plenty of people are working 2 jobs just to get by. And when people are working so much just to get by, again, you have a lot of social ills, more stress, more fatigue. People have more mental illness when they're overwhelmed like that. And we see a lot of that in our society today. And more, the more the parents aren't in the home, the more children suffer. And I'm a firm believer in that. And it's tough. It's tough to live on a single income home today. So I think more and more it's so important to get our own financial houses in order. Don't incur debt if you can avoid it. If you do use credit cards, paying them off every single month. And then when it comes to savings, get on a budget, start putting that money away, because the frivolous life. I had one guy come in, he knew he was in trouble. He knew the IRS was coming in, so he figured, hey, before they come and take my money, I might as well do something fun. So he went and bought a motorcycle and had a monthly payment with it, $300-400. He figured, he was kind of surprised he was able to do that. So he went and got another one, and then another one. And after 3 motorcycles, I forget if it was 3 or 4, he finally stopped. But now he was paying thousands of dollars in insurance for the motorcycles, the payments for the motorcycles, and he couldn't afford to pay the IRS, and the IRS was not going to give him credit for all these payments on motorcycles. So he was just going to have to take some of them back and just return them and take a huge loss on them. And that would also cause a huge hit to his credit. So that's an extreme example of what you don't want to do financially. But as you prepare your financial house and find financial freedom for you and your family, you can deal with your taxes head on. And one of the big things we're telling people now is to pay your taxes early. The second quarter deadline just passed on June 17th. And if you are catching up, start on the third quarter. Get those payments in, do the third quarter, and then move backwards to the second and then the first quarter if you have extra funds and can do that. But start where you are and start getting your own financial house in order. And part of that is paying taxes and paying sufficient taxes in, so that way you don't get a surprise at the end of the year. Again, with interest and penalties, it can be over 50%, when people look at how quick it is growing. So give us a call if you have any questions, or if you just need some economic advice. We can send you to financial coaches, refer you to financial programs that can help you and your family find financial freedom and breathe easy.